City of Frankfort Board of Commissioners. Today is October 18th, and I'll ask the clerk to please call for a roll.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Present.
Commissioner May, Commissioner Unger,
Present.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Present. And we do have a quorum, so we'll begin. And I'll turn it over to City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for attending the specially called meeting. Appreciate it because I know everybody enjoys actually having a free Monday evening. But really, thank you because this is a discussion we wanted to happen sooner rather than later. So we'll have time to really talk about the priorities and understanding ARPA, possible infrastructure money, and what it can be used for. And one of the things I wanted to emphasize, and Rebecca and I have been talking about this, and she's been working with Andy Seth, our consultant in DC, on the presentation, is that keeping in mind we do have time to spend these funds. There's not an immediate deadline, which is good. And that means since we've started our strategic planning process, as you all may know, we're going to have senior staff meet next month, taking all the good work that y'all did last month and continue to work on it, that this will be a good opportunity as we heard from you the priorities, we can further develop them, link it to all the current plans that we have, the downtown master plan, the parks master plan, arts, all those. And as we understand how this money can be used, as we move this along, especially with the strategic plan to be adopted sometime next year, early next year before the budget, and we'll be engaging with citizens, this will be, opportune because staff can have input and help you guys with setting the policy priorities for where this funds should be spent, as well as gathering input from citizens. So once again, I just want to say thank you for attending and being available for the special meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Hall.
Good evening, everyone. As Laura said, we just kind of wanted to get together with you all and talk about some opportunities that are coming up. Andy Seth is here with Sustainable Strategies out of Washington. Sustainable strategies, and specifically Andy have helped us with several grants, including our Tiger Grant on 2nd Street, our Land and Water Conservation Grant with Dolly Graham, and our NEA grant for our Arts Master Plan. So one of the things that he helps us do is helps navigate through potential grant opportunities that are coming out of Washington. So we wanted to give him an opportunity today to talk a little bit about how ARPA funding can be spent and what these infrastructure grants could look like. We know that's kind of a moving target at this point, but we wanted to have him kind of give you all a little insight on what that might look like and how we might want to spend those funds. So I will turn it over to Andy now to give his presentation.
Hi, everyone. This is Andy Seth. I've met some of you, others. I am the president of Sustainable Strategies DC, as Rebecca mentioned. Happy to keep working with the City of Frankfort, identifying and chasing funds for your priorities. So what I'm going to be talking about today is 3 opportunities. One that's behind us, but the money's still to roll out. And the other 2 that these bills are being negotiated right now. So this money is all forward-looking. So one is the American Rescue Plan. This is the bill that got passed in May of this year. And this is where you got the $7.1 million directly. And there are some other resources in this bill that will be competitive opportunities. I'll talk about that a little bit. The infrastructure bipartisan bill, this is passed the Senate, but it's stuck in the House because it's tied to the Build Back Better reconciliation bill. So these won't move until there is agreement on the shape of the reconciliation bill, particularly the size. That is expected. Speaker Pelosi is working to push the House to pass this by the end of the month, October 31st. It's an internal deadline, the deadline being that the highway funds run out then. That is an important deadline, but this actually could drag on longer if they miss that. But she's working her hardest to get it done then. We'll see if that happens. And again, the Build Back Better, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's the bill that's going to change the most. I'll present what is being discussed for the bill, but with a reduction in the price tag, it's going to come down from $3.5 trillion. Senator Manchin from West Virginia has indicated that he will not support a package that size. His vote is critical on this bill. So this bill is going to likely look half as big as the 3.5 trillion. And with that, programs will fall out, timing, some of the programs won't be funded for as many years. But again, I'll talk about the programs that are important to local governments, just with the caveat that this is today's news and tomorrow might look different. Let's take these one at a time and talk and discuss. And if you've got questions about these, let's do it one after the other, just because this is a lot of difficult information to keep in your head, just because I'm going to be talking about different bills. Let's start off with the American Rescue Plan. Again, Frankfort got $7.1 million. This is direct money, and the program that you're getting this through, it's called the Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. Half the money you received this year, half you will receive next year. And local governments across the country are still getting their heads around how they will spend these monies. So you're not late to the game at all. A lot of communities are doing fact finding and trying to figure out where the best places to spend this money are and the clearest places to spend this money. The Treasury Department put out a final rule that did clarify, not with tremendous clarity, but it did clarify 6 areas that are eligible for use of these funds. You need to meet certain criteria to use these funds in these 6 different buckets. Some are going to be easier than other buckets to spend from. And I'll give you a sense, just with the communities that I'm working with across the country, where you'll see other cities making investments and use that however you like to guide your thinking. But let's just walk through the 6 ways to spend these dollars. The first is public health expenditures. So a lot of communities, and this is an area, I'll just say up front, that I don't see a lot of communities spending these dollars in this way. But this is vaccination programs, it's testing, it's mental health treatment. It's a look at how to respond to the health impact of COVID. A lot of these resources were out on the street in earlier ways. So a lot of cities aren't choosing to invest these dollars in these ways. You still see small investments. The city of Port St. Lucie that I'm working with was doing some more testing sites. They were using some of these monies, and I think they're getting $20 million. It wasn't a very big investment they were putting into this bucket. But if you're looking at any of the health impacts of COVID, this is the bucket that you can do a lot of stuff with community-wide. You don't need to target these monies to any particular populations in the community. If you've got public health needs, this is the bucket for that. The second bucket is a little more difficult to square. This is the economic needs that you can address. And with this is a lot of direct payments to businesses, to individuals, to nonprofits. This, you really need to tie back your spending to a concrete economic impact. So if you were to be audited by the Treasury Department, you'd need to demonstrate that, we're investing in this business because their payroll went down, because of collections went down, because of, all the things that economically they suffered. you'd need to show why you were investing in the places and the programs that you were putting this money out on the street for. This, because it is more challenging, and honestly, there is a lot of funding already out on the street to provide this assistance to individuals and businesses. The SBA has been providing direct loans and grants to businesses. There is a lot of money going to housing directly to individuals. So a lot of money is already going out on the street, not coming through cities, but going out on the street in rent assistance and mortgage assistance. So I don't see a lot of the clients that I'm working with putting money into this bucket. Some of them are on the margins. And again, I'll use Port St. Lucie as an example. They had a small business assistance grant and loan program. They were looking at very specific census tracts, and these were the lowest income census tracts in the community, where they would make these grants and loans eligible. And I think they were putting, maybe a couple $100,000 into that particular program. And it was a program that got stood up with earlier CARES money. They're seeing the demand for that program wind down. So they didn't think that they needed to put a lot of money into that program, but they're investing a little bit more just to help the businesses that need that financial assistance. This is the third bucket, and this is one that you do see a lot of communities crunching the numbers and trying to figure out if this is a way that they can spend these dollars. And as I understand it, this is the bucket that Frankfort is thinking seriously about investing if you can make the case. And this is if you can demonstrate that the city has lost money, and this has to be across the board. It can't be just particular accounts. And there is a formula that the Treasury Department has released that you take a look at the entire year, you compare it to the year before, and if you can show that revenues were down in 2020, you can use these monies to plug that budget hole. The nice thing about this is if you are able to show a budget hole, if you do plug it, then these monies become clean in that you only after that need to invest in government services with your monies. So it provides you the flexibility to do some things that some of the other buckets you're going to be a little constrained by. So this is, as I understand it, you are showing a budget gap. So this is an appropriate use of these funds. Fourth bucket is, this is more of the social service programs, so not so much direct payments to individuals or businesses or nonprofits, but investing in the programs that the community may have to serve those particular populations. Again, this is very census tract driven. You can't do this in places in the community that did not suffer economically from the pandemic. So you'd need to make the case that this is a need, an economic need, and these are programs that address those people that deserve this support. I will say in this particular bucket, the bucket by and large isn't popular, but there is one particular bullet in this bucket that I am seeing cities invest in. And the White House has not put out a ton of guidance, just that final rule, but they did clarify that last bullet on here, violence prevention programs, in that they are allowing communities, cities, to invest widely in police departments. So this can be facilities that you want to improve. This can be hiring, new hiring to improve safety in those parts of the town that need it. I know that I was working with the city earlier in the year. We were looking at some earmark requests for gunshot detection, a system that can tell you when shots are fired, lets Chief Adams know how to deploy resources. That is something that the White House memo suggests is an eligible use of these funds, as well as any violence prevention programs targeted at youth or what have you. So they have clarified that police departments, very widely, these dollars can be spent. So I do see some communities putting monies that they would have spent for their police departments using American Rescue Plan dollars to fill those needs.
Hey, Andy, can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Hey, this is Kyle Thompson. I'm sorry to interrupt. So two things. You said across on bucket 3, you said that across the board revenues had to be reduced. Does that mean that, like for instance, in the city of Frankfort, we had a significant decrease in our occupational tax revenue? Does that mean that we also have to look across the board at all the other revenue streams to make sure that those had an equal or at least an impact as well on the total revenues? Or is that, can we look at the whole depending upon where that came from?
It's the net that they're looking at. So you're looking at the whole, not a particular account. So if you were down in one, but you were going gangbusters and everything else, a lot of communities aren't, but if by chance you were, then you wouldn't be able to plug a budget hole because they do look at it across the entire city, all accounts. And I think and Laura, you might want to jump in. I think you've crunched the numbers and looked at all of the accounts that you need to looked at all the ups and downs, and you are still showing a budget hole because of those losses.
Yes, that's right, Andy. And we have Alicia Boyd here as well. Part of what we were thinking and presenting, because Alicia will be presenting at the November work session, kind of the state of the city finances and looking broadly at how our occupational tax revenue. But she has crunched the numbers, and we can prove significant revenue loss across the city. So when he talks about that being clean, yes, there's a way to show that we have significant revenue loss. And you're right. I mean, in 2020, it was about 1.9 in occupational tax revenue, about 3 million overall loss. But I think upwards, Alicia, if you want to jump in, I think you were telling me about upwards close to $5 million when we looked at all the different accounts.
That's correct. And the reason for that is when you do this calculation, you remove any federal dollars that you got. So the CARES money we got previously that kind of filled the hole for 2021. I'm getting my fiscal years mixed up. We remove that. We don't count any of the federal dollars. And there's a couple other things that you don't put in that calculation as well. But that's the biggie for us because we get a lot of federal money. And when you remove that and then you allow for a 4.1% revenue increase, that makes it quite a large revenue loss, as Laura said, which is it's a little different from just our true deficit that we had in 2021. So it's a different calculation that the federal government requires us to do for ARPA purposes. So
if you were to choose, you've got $3.5 million to spend this year, you've got a $5 million hole that you can demonstrate, all of the 3.5 could get put into that third bucket as we were talking about.
And with regard to the violence prevention programs, and that fourth bucket you were talking about, I think that was more eligible programs that mitigate some social service needs and issues.
Yes.
Is there any mitigation with regard to youth offenders or drug offenders or anything like that with the courts or anything of that nature that could be applied to?
Broadly, yes. That violence prevention is defined very broadly, and there are a lot of examples in the White House memo. I think some of those examples do touch on the exact programs that you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate you letting me interrupt.
Sure.
And Andy, just one question. So because it sounds like the formula that the Treasury Department has put out there, it's working to our favor here, right? It's our loss is larger than what we receive. So we could put our entire allocation into essentially into our general fund. And it's clean then we can use it for whatever we want. Is that right?
That's right. And just as far as reporting and any possible auditing goes, you know, it's probably an easy way to spend monies and to prove that the monies were spent wisely.
So is the rest of this immaterial? I mean, really, if we could just use it all in that one bucket, then we can, right? Should we just not do that?
Well, Mayor Wilkinson, Andy's also going to be talking about the infrastructure bill, but you know, we need to have further policy discussions. We wanted to bring this out there, but and looking at the priorities from our strategic plan and elsewhere, that we thought it'd be good to have a discussion and you understand the complete use of ARPA. And
Right.
we didn't want to limit just to one discussion on one area where we knew that we were eligible. We wanted to present the full information to you all, so you can have a complete picture and then move forward with recommending with policy decisions.
Got it.
And Laura, if I may, I also wanted to get a handle on the revenue loss calculation. I wanted to have that information for me and obviously for you guys as quickly as possible. And this just kind of fell into place with this presentation this evening. So I'm glad I went on ahead and put a calculation together for you so you would have all the appropriate information at your disposal.
I can jump to the 5th bucket. And I should have made revenue loss the last bucket just to build suspense to that, but we'll cover these last 2 buckets. This is if you've experienced a lot of overtime pay with a lot of the folks, the frontline folks who are dealing with the pandemic. I don't see a ton of communities doing this, in that the CARES Act actually covered a lot of this for communities. So you don't see a ton of this spending. It is a use that you can take advantage of. And I'll say that I don't mean to suggest you're lucky that you've got the revenue whole. But those communities that don't have it, they've got to spend it in one of these other buckets. And it does get a little bit more challenging for those communities, just because they really do need to stay within the lanes with some very specific criteria with some of these other buckets. And for those communities that, you know, might not have the budget whole, I'm seeing a lot of communities spend on water, broadband, infrastructure. This is, you know, water, sewer. You see a lot of cities, just because the final rule just suggests that if you've got water infrastructure needs, this is something that you can dump the monies into. If you've got broadband needs and you don't have very high internet speeds, you can put the money there too. So again, those communities that didn't experience the budget holes, many of them have big water infrastructure, broadband infrastructure projects, and this is an attractive approach for many of those cities. So those were the 6. We can stop there just on the local recovery fund. I'll talk about just another few programs in the American Rescue Plan that are competitive opportunities that are coming up. But these 6 areas are where you can spend the $7.1 million that you're receiving directly. Any more discussion about the 6 buckets? Which bucket might be most appropriate for you guys? Good. So these are just a couple of other programs that are coming up. Some are upon us right now. Some are going to come very soon. And some of these we're working on already. But they did invest some dollars in some agencies that can push out monies. We've talked about this on our monthly calls, but there are some additional monies. In the CARES Act, there was FTA monies that went to the state. And we were able to get some of those monies. It's still in process, but for the transit center. I understand that your costs are increasing on the transit center. As such, there could be an opportunity. The state got more money through that same approach. The CARES Act dumped money on them. Now the American Rescue Plan money is dumping money from the Federal Transit Administration to the state for transit projects, to buy buses, to invest in transit centers. It's worth a conversation, at least, with the state to figure out how they're spending those monies, if there is an opportunity, if they understand, I'm sure they do, that these costs are increasing, and how to plug any holes that you've got with that particular project. Separately, the Economic Development Administration has a couple of different opportunities that we're looking at. They had the opportunity in the CARES Act to look at travel and tourism. This is an area that EDA never looks at. They're more interested in manufacturing. So when Congress provided them the authority to look at travel and tourism, they said thank you, but no thank you, and they didn't spend those CARES Act dollars in the travel tourism sector. But with the American Rescue Plan, Congress mandated that these dollars get spent, some of these dollars get spent in the travel tourism area, just because the Congress saw that restaurants were folding, hotels were hurting, people weren't visiting attractions. So it's an obvious sector that is hurting from the pandemic. This is a couple of opportunities to chase money for travel and tourism. The competitive grants we're taking a look at, we are chasing an opportunity to invest in a couple of fields in Frankfort. That's an eligible activity, to add lights and bathrooms to those fields so that you can attract regional tournaments, that you can drive visitors to town for additional stays, trips to the breweries, and stays at the hotels and such. So that's going to be super competitive. We are developing an application for that. Secondly, the state is getting travel tourism dollars from EDA. And I believe Penny has reached out to the state to start a conversation. These dollars are less to build things and more to market places. So there's an opportunity. The state's got, some significant money to market itself in the places in Kentucky to travelers. So there's an opportunity for Frankfort to put your hands on some of those state travel tourism dollars to market your attractions, your places to visit. And lastly, as far as competitive goes, and this is something we've got a little bit more time. We haven't put our heads to a definite idea here yet, but this is workforce development training. They understand that a lot of the folks at the bottom of the economic scale suffered most from the pandemic. So this is to train those workers for jobs that, new jobs that might be coming into a community, train them for, if they've lost jobs of industries that are never coming back to places. This is to put people back to work. It's called the Good Jobs Challenge. These applications are due January 26th, and we're going to start thinking about what we want to propose for that particular opportunity too. And these are any grants of anywhere up to, a couple of $1 million to actually implement job training.
And Andy, I'm just confirming it's January 26th.
22.
2022.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Just making sure.
I changed that and it didn't save. I thought I was going to, in the version I sent earlier, I did see that it was 2021. I thought I changed it on this version, but I missed it twice. So that's the American Rescue Plan. Let's stop here just with any American Rescue Plan questions before I jump into the infrastructure bill.
Andy, on the Good Jobs Challenge, would that overlap with what we already did with the earmark request?
I asked that, and I think as I was talking to Penny, she had some different ideas for that, but it can overlap with that if that is the kind of training that you want to see more monies for. I think she was thinking about something a little broader than that. So we need to talk further about how that might fit. It's basically 3 ways they're looking at these grants. One, if you don't have the partners and systems in place, you can get funding to put together those partnerships. Secondly, if the partnerships exist, but you don't have the curriculum to train folks, you can get more money to develop that curriculum. And lastly, if you've got the partnership, if you've got the curriculum, but you just need to put it out on the street, you can get much bigger money to actually implement the training.
Andy, does that training have to be through a 501c3 or C4, depending upon what the application is? And does it have to be a institution of higher learning? Does it have to be some type of registered organization with the Kentucky Department of Education, anything like that for skills training?
So there are a lot of folks that are eligible for this, but you're exactly spot on in that you want to submit an application with lots of those kind of partners, with community colleges, with higher ed, with any workforce training programs that already exist. Anybody who's coming at this, singly is not going to be very competitive. But if you put together a broad, comprehensive regional team, that can be attractive to EDA. And it's worth then deciding who the applicant should be, given that a number of entities are eligible, but one might make more sense than others. And that's we can have two.
So the city may not even be the applicant. We may be the receiver of funds to
if you're the applicant, you'll receive them. But if you're not, you won't receive them unless you're included somehow in the budget as a project partner.
Do you personally know of any other locales around Frankfort that are working on similar issues because of economic downturn?
I do work with cities across the country.
Mm-hmm.
They're all looking at this. I haven't heard a crystallized idea yet. I mean, they're all kind of in the partnership gathering, idea generation stage right now. I imagine that some cities are going to apply directly, be the applicant. But with this, EDA is, I think, going to prefer places that have workforce development programs actually be the applicant. So be it a community college, be it somebody with a little bit more hands-on interaction with the trainees. I think that could be a more attractive applicant.
Does that essentially, if we are not the applicant and we are just a partner, helping organize this and things of that nature, does it take away from our grand pot of money that people will say, oh, well, Frankfort, Kentucky has already received X amount of dollars. They don't need this. Does that go against some magic number in a formula, that the White House is using to determine if we're eligible for those total amounts of money, if there is a third party that actually applies for those?
No. And everyone wants to be grabby with this money. So no one's not chasing it.
Good.
If I could just add one thing, Commissioner Thompson, you were asking about if other entities, regional entities are pursuing this maybe close by. I do know, Commerce Lexington, the Chamber of Commerce, they have a strategic planning where they're doing this regional strategic planning around business, around workforce, encompassing a lot of different areas of economic development. So that's one thing that's already happening now.
Does it reach to Franklin County, or is it
Yes.
simply bad? Okay.
Right. KCDC has attended those meetings. So, and actually it was just connected with some folks from AT&T to get invited to them as well. But that is ongoing right now, that kind of some of that strategic planning. And that might be, one area, or also looking, in our community with Kentucky State or others, and thinking about if there's other skills gaps or upskilling that we could look at.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great. Thank you, City Manager.
Any other questions before we jump to the infrastructure bill? So what I'm going to provide here is, and there are a lot of bullets. I'm not going into every bullet here. I'm going to give you the flavor of the infrastructure bill and talk about the opportunities that we should start getting. And again, there are a couple of buckets in the infrastructure bill. This was negotiated over the summer. It got bipartisan support. This is a $1.2 trillion bill. And this is very likely to pass the House as soon as the reconciliation package does come together. You've got folks putting on the brakes on this just because they've got the leverage to get what they want out of the reconciliation bill. So that's what's happening. There are some just different areas that this will invest in. Very significant investment in transportation. You see all of these programs, and this is a 5-year bill. So these numbers happen every year for 5 years. So just lots of money going to roads, bridges, complete streets, alternative transportation projects. And by that, I mean trails and electric vehicles and low emission vehicles, charging stations. So there's lots of opportunities to invest in your transportation infrastructure. This is more money than the U.S. Department of Transportation will have gotten in a very, very long time. So some of these programs, the biggest and best program, and this is, Rebecca mentioned this earlier, we won a Tiger grant 4 or 5 years ago, and you guys are constructing 2nd Street with that funding. That program is the biggest thing that cities can chase every year from the Department of Transportation, and it's $1 billion. You see here just from this list that there's going to be billions of dollars every year in so many different areas. So a lot of opportunity in the transportation sector. What Frankfort should be doing is getting ready for this. And by that, I mean, as they get ready to spend these dollars, the agency is going to get them. Some of these monies will go to the transportation cabinet and you'll get them that way. But some of these are going to be competitive federal dollars in that you'll apply directly to the U.S. Department of Transportation. Some of these are programs that have never existed, and they'll need to get stood up and rolled out for the very first time. But as either the transportation cabinet or the DOT at the national level are making decisions, they're going to want to invest in places that are ready. You know, more shovel ready is better. So if you've got design, engineering, any kind of planning that you can do to move your transportation projects closer to being ready to construct, you're going to be in a much better place to put your hands on these dollars. Some of these programs will have planning dollars, but again, it takes several years to plan, you know, very significant transportation projects. And if you can do that planning up front, you'll have, you know, 5 years of bites at the apple to actually fund those infrastructure projects. So as you're putting together the strategic plan, it's a good idea just to think about major transportation investments that Frankfort needs. One of these programs will be able to support those infrastructure needs. Any questions just about the transportation bucket? Yep, Mayor?
So, Andy, would it make sense for each of these categories listed here, have a project that would fit into this, and then, you know, get as ready as possible for each one of those?
Yeah, I would even, and what I'm going to suggest will marry up to these, but it just is simpler to think about, just because some of these are named programs without a lot of definition behind the programs itself. But to think about what key roads, transportation corridors need investment? What trails do you want to build? Is there any electric charging infrastructure that you want to construct in the community? Are there complete streets? I know you're building one on 2nd Street. Are there, you know, more streets in the community that you want to add sidewalks and bike lanes? To think about it like that, just because a lot of these programs in this bill and the bill I'm going to talk about next, these same projects, we can go to several different accounts to pull money from. And I had a conversation with the Deputy Assistant Secretary the other day at at DOT. And this is beautiful if they can manage this. They understand how difficult it is for cities to chase federal dollars. They also realize that a fire hose of programs are going to be coming out on the street. It is their desire to put one application process in place, and that, you know, with a complete street project, you could put it forward and they'd have multiple buckets to fund something like that. You know, whatever the project is, there's a lot of bites at the apple if you can demonstrate that it reduces carbon, or if it gets people out of their cars, or if it's good for biking, walking. All of this, a lot of this is very sustainable. They're looking at greenhouse gas emission reductions. So that is a lens that's important to think about your transportation investment through too. But broadly, yes, to have some ideas for trail projects, complete street projects, bridge projects, road projects. Yes.
Nice to meet you, Andy. This is Lisa. So yeah, I'm a little excited about this because as someone who was on Walk Bike Frankfort board, I know we have basically a walk bike master plan where we could pull specific trail projects, you know, sidewalk, complete street projects straight out of that, as well as, you know, from our downtown master plan. So it feels like it could be fairly easy for us to sort of pull some of those projects together.
Yeah, and I think that's super important, just because if cities are struggling with what their priorities are and don't know what they want to build next, some of these opportunities are going to pass them by. So having a very clear understanding, it's this and then that, helps.
Yeah.
A couple of more areas that this bill supports: energy and the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. This is something that I was involved with 10 years ago. It was a one-time program. What it did, it was $3.2 billion at the time. Just a one-time investment. It was following the recession. And what it did is it gave money directly to cities to do carbon emission reduction projects. So you had cities replacing light bulbs, or adding solar panels to City Hall, or adding car infrastructure, electric car infrastructure charging stations. So what this is, it's a return of that program. So cities would get a direct formula every year to spend on whatever they want, as long as you could demonstrate that it was greenhouse gas emission reducing. So this is a program that I was a big champion of, just because it did a lot of good in a lot of places. So there's 5 years worth of money for that. And again, there are some other programs. I don't know if you've got electric grid needs in your part of Kentucky, but there's money to improve the grid. They've got other monies for specifically schools, so you can improve the energy efficiency in the schools in Frankfort. They've got loan programs, and likely these loan programs, if history is a guide, with so much free money, grant money out on the street in so many different areas, the loan programs weren't very popular the last time they dumped grant monies out on the street. They put them there, but people had access to grants and didn't want loans. But nonetheless, Mayor, just to your point, to think about energy efficiency projects in the community, that if you had, you know, couple $100,000, could you retrofit City Hall? Could you, do streetlights that are LED? Just those kind of needs that you could just do quick hits with these monies, particularly if you've got to replace any electric, smart meters or what have you. If you're looking at making these investments anyway, because green energy, costs sometimes a little more, this money can be used to make your investments, all the better, all the more sustainable. I'll jump to the last, I think it's the last. One more bucket besides this in the infrastructure bill. Water, so they've got drinking water investment, they've got wastewater sewer investment, and these are just lots of different programs that can address those needs. I know that you guys have spent lots of money already on sewer improvements across the community, but if you've got additional water needs, this money is going to flow through the states, a lot of this money. Some of it might be competitive from the federal level, but a lot of this money is going to go to the revolving loan funds. So the idea here, get yourself on their priority lists. You probably have some projects already that you've identified as priorities to the state, but if not, make sure that you are listed, because they're going to walk through those lists if they get money dumped on them, and they're just going to fund, as far down those lists as they can. As far as the infrastructure bill goes, they've got a couple of more programs. I've never talked about this with your team. I don't know if this is an issue or not. Broadband speed, is that, broadly speaking, a challenge in Frankfort, or do you have the internet speeds across the community that it's not low speed, it's pretty high speed?
We're pretty good. Our local plant board, I think we have broadband availability. We have fiber, 30-40% of the community will be available by the end of the year.
Yeah.
The city itself should be okay there within a couple of years.
So this money probably is not that available to you. Where they really want to focus these broadband dollars are those small rural areas that the fiber has not reached yet. And the pandemic, exposed that in ways that it hadn't previously, that there is a digital divide in America, and they want to close that with this funding. So we can always look at this when this money does become available, just to see if you meet the criteria, but it's usually upload, download speeds. You have to have pretty slow internet to chase these dollars. And there's some EPA money. You guys have chased EPA assessment monies. There's going to be a lot more, more money than EPA's ever gotten for brownfields. So to the extent that you are identifying through the assessment funding that we have gotten needs for cleanup, there's going to be some big cleanup opportunities through this legislation. So the brownfield program is going to grow. The schools can convert their buses to zero emission, low emission buses if that is a need at the school districts. And there's just recycling monies besides. So this bill has passed. This bill is going to look pretty much the same once it does pass the House. These are going to be the opportunities that cities are going to be able to put their hands on. Any question on the infrastructure bill?
Only thing, of course, I'll ask Andy is that, you share the PowerPoint. I know we looked at it once before, but having the final copy will be helpful, as we'll share it with the team here.
For sure.
Thank you.
I'll fix that date too. Third time. So let's talk about the Build Back Better. And don't hold me to any of this just because this is a moving target. So this is what has got Washington all gummed up. This is the $3.5 trillion bill. This is not going to be bipartisan. This is going to be past the Senate, and that's the chamber that they need to get agreement with. It's going to pass on just Democratic votes in the Senate. It's called the reconciliation process, in that most legislation requires 60 plus votes, or it can be filibustered. With a reconciliation bill, it's a budget tool that allows a vote with 50 votes. They can only do it once a year. This is the pathway to getting all of what they want to include, and it's called the soft infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better. I highlight the areas that have snuck in here that are good for cities, but broadly speaking, this is childcare, this is healthcare, this is education, this is workforce development. So there's going to be a lot of, and these aren't monies that will necessarily go to the city of Frankfort, but they're going to be monies out there to invest in lots of different ways that your residents will benefit from. But just because it is such a big package, they've been attaching, little pet programs that do benefit and cities can access. So I'm going to walk you through just some of those. Again, it's 3.5 trillion. The price tag has to come down just because you've got 2 senators who won't support a package at 3.5 trillion. So they're indicating that maybe a package between 1.5 and 2 trillion they will support. So again, a lot of this funding is going to disappear as far as the numbers that I've shown. This is what added up to 3.5. And over the last week, Speaker Pelosi has indicated that it might be easier, rather than just give every program a haircut, to ditch programs. And you've had Senator Manchin come out saying that he needs some of the programs to go away. So some of these programs might not just decrease, they might not get included in final passage. This negotiation is ongoing. They're trying to wrap it up by October 31st. So in the next 10 days, we'll see where this moves. But you'll see just in some of the things that I highlight, this is money on top of the infrastructure bill. So this is even more money for complete streets and green projects and trails and bikeability and walkability. So more. And this very specific program is something that only cities can chase. Some of the, and I mentioned the Tiger program, which became the Build program, which is now the Raise program. It's the only money out there that cities can get directly from the Department of Transportation. But guess who else can get it? States can get it, ports can get it, airports can get it. So that $1 billion becomes a lot smaller when you've got all those hands chasing it. This is, a very big program for just cities. So this is nice. The Park Service is going to have a lot more investment for parks and recreation. So again, another bucket that you guys should consider. What are some park improvements? What are the priority park improvements in Frankfort? Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is the agency that really does deal with affordable housing. So there's going to be more CDBG monies coming your way. This is something that you don't get a direct allocation, but you can chase monies through the state. So there'll be opportunities, and this is all size dependent. But you're not a entitlement community, you're a non-entitlement community, but the bucket of state monies that you'll be able to put your hand into for projects that benefit low and moderate income places in Frankfurt, that's going to grow. There'll be more affordable housing. There'll be some new programs. Every administration in HUD particularly comes out with new ways to benefit cities and communities. So here you see the Unlocking Possibilities program. That's going to be something new, and we'll have to see what that shakes out to mean. But it's akin to a lot of the sustainable communities work that I imagine happened in the Obama administration. You're going to see a program like that roll out with the Biden folks, and that they're going to want to look at low-income neighborhoods, then we're going to look at schools in those neighborhoods and economic development in those neighborhoods and green space in those neighborhoods, and taking a comprehensive look at not just fixing one thing, but looking at all the ways that those places can become better places to live. We were talking about EDA earlier, more EDA monies, and this is workforce development. So looking at places across the country that got smacked by the pandemic, by the economic impacts of COVID, and investing in those places. Two more slides. This is energy. You saw earlier the energy efficiency conservation block grants in the infrastructure bill. More money in the Build Back Better bill for this, a lot more money. So with this, cities are going to be able to do so much in this space, renewable energy, energy efficiency. They've got monies for schools. They've got money for wastewater treatment plants. They've got lots of ways to improve your efficiency, to reduce your energy costs, and to cut greenhouse gas emissions. And solar. Do you have any solar projects in Frankfort? I see smiles.
None started, but
We have lots of proposals.
lots of talk.
We'll line them up just because there's money for that too. And on top of the EDA money for workforce development, there is more Department of Labor money for workforce development, looking at very specific sectors, be it adults, be it youth, be it, what have you. They want to invest in putting people back to work. So that's a big focus of this legislation too. So that's the 30,000 foot level of how to drink water from these fire hoses. The devil will be in the details when the legislation gets passed. Then the agencies, to the extent that a lot of these are new monies, will need to develop these programs to put the regulations and the rules and the criteria in place of how you will get and spend these monies. So let's say that they come to an agreement at the end of October. They make progress and pass these bills in the November, December timeframe. It's not going to be until probably mid-year at the earliest next year that these monies really begin to start flowing, just because they need to go to the agencies, they need to put their handprints all over them. Again, create programs that have never been created before. So we ought to be ready early in the year with ideas. We ought to advance those ideas to as ready as we can get them before we submit any applications. And you ought to think about the spending. We'll put the applications in, we'll hear back, best case at the end of next year. Probably we're thinking about 2023 for actually implementation of these projects. So that's the time frame that we should be thinking about for most of this. What needs to happen in Frankfort? When can shovels go in the ground on what projects in 2023? Who's got questions on Build Back Better?
Thank you, Andy. I think it's hard because knowing all the debate in Washington, D.C. about what's really going to happen, we got to focus on the reality now, which is ARPA and hopefully infrastructure. Yes. But that I know this one is a big unknown.
It's a big unknown. This is the Biden agenda. The Democrats control the House and the Senate. So the thinking is that this is going to happen in one way or another. The process has been bumpy and ugly, but something's going to come across the finish line in the next months. We'll take another look when it does, but this is the early view of what it looks like.
All right, thank you, Andy. Do we have any questions for Andy? Is this the end of the discussion part, or are we gonna?
This is the end of my presentation.
Okay.
Yes, before we get to the possible action items or not, yes, please ask away for Andy.
I want no question here, but I think we have our marching orders to, between now and the end of the year, get as many of these ideas as far along as possible. I think this is Andy, you probably agree this is a good time to be a city commissioner or a mayor with this much money coming out of DC. There's nothing like it. So we have to get as much as we can. If they're putting it out there, we have to get as much for Frankfort as we can.
Or a bad
I
time
tell-
there if we don't do it right.
Exactly. If surrounding communities do it better than us.
Right.
I tell mayors and commissioners all the time when they come to DC and we're chasing funding, it's not the trimming of this program or that program or what you do on the margins that you're going to be remembered by, but it's what you build in your community that will really stand the test of time. There's a lot of money for a lot of places to build a lot of stuff. So this can transform Frankfort.
Exciting.
You know, Andy, I had kind of a larger picture question for you. And, you know, I know, you know, some of these things are unknown, but for Frankfort, as you know, we've talked about, so we have these ongoing revenue losses. So our occupational tax revenue, I know Rebecca has spoken about it. I think Alicia has been on your monthly calls as well. And you know, and the commissioners have all spoken about, what we know is that, you know, we've had this major revenue loss, and thank goodness for CARES money and ARPA money, and that's very important, and that is really going to fill the gaps for the next, you know, 2 years that we have this. But we really have to make investment into projects that are going to have a return on investment, whether it's creating jobs, but because we have to look at other ways to for ongoing revenue, because you know we don't know if you know, right now state government is working generally either 3 days or 2 days a week back in their offices. People are still working from home, and that may continue, and we have to plan for 3 years from now to make sure that we make up, you know, it's got to come from a lot of different places. And so I guess my question is, in that scenario, are there, from discussions or you've heard from other cities or ideas, knowing a little bit more of the details of what we can go after, that type of investment, whether it's from some of the jobs provisions or others, that really focus on the economic development and longer term impact that will help Frankfort find additional revenue sources to plug in the lost revenue from the state?
I think that's exactly right. And I think to be competitive for a lot of these programs, the administration knows that a lot of cities aren't going to go back to what they used to be. They're going to look different after this, in that the workers might not be coming downtown. The travelers might have shifted to a different place. The world's just going to look different. And you need to present a vision with a lot of these applications, where you're going, where the jobs are going to be. And with this administration in particular, taking a look at it through an equity and a sustainability lens, making sure that low-income communities, low-income residents, minority residents are front and center in the projects that you are identifying, and that these projects are environmentally sustainable, that they are the greenhouse gas reducing projects, that these are the projects of the next generation and not the last generation. So it's all of those lenses, trying to figure out where you're going, where the jobs are going to be, who to benefit, and making sure that it's green along the way. And I would suggest we're going to have a lot of monies flowing for the next couple of years. I would bet that we're probably going to have a backlash after this, a spending backlash, in that cities won't see these kind of revenues coming in after this.
Andy, that's a question that I had. There is a strong likelihood that there will be at least some change with regard to the House and Senate in 2022. These monies that are being designated at this time, once they are pledged at that point, can they be pulled back by the House, since they have the purse strings, or are these guaranteed amounts that cities can, once they get awarded the money, they can guarantee that the money will be coming down the pike?
So these monies, once they get approved, they'll be on the street, they'll be in the pipeline. They can't claw these monies back. What we haven't talked about today, it's just the regular appropriations. You know, this is money on top of the money that the federal government spends anyway. So what you might see is some of those programs get trimmed if there is a change in Congress. We actually didn't see it. I've been doing this through a number of presidential and congressional transitions. And in 2016, although President Trump talked about changing the shape of government, and many cities were worried that some of the programs that they cared about might have been cut or eliminated, you really didn't see that. That was not the interest of the Trump administration. So, and a lot of those programs, in fact, grew on the margins. You didn't see the programs increasing substantially, but you didn't see the cuts either, which was a welcome surprise to a lot of communities. We'll see if any of Congress in the next year changes. I don't think you'd see programs like this emerge through a divided Congress. You wouldn't. This is only happening because you have single party control right now.
This is great stuff, Andy. I appreciate you putting this together and breaking it down. Do we have any other questions for Andy or any other discussion? No? Seeing none. Andy, thank you for your time and taking time on a Monday night to join us. And for all you do, Frankfort, I enjoy working with you on these things.
Thank you, everyone.
And we need Andy for the next discussion, or we need Andy for the action item?
No, we don't. We have Rebecca.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Hi, everyone.
Next up, we have the Joint Economic Development Grant for Sports, Tourism, and Recreation.
Yeah,
So
we always need Andy, but as I say, we have Rebecca. And I'll turn it over to Rebecca to talk about this. And it's something that Andy mentioned at the beginning about this one opportunity.
right. And I just want to let you all know, I know this is a kind of a work session. So if you all don't feel comfortable about voting on this, we can definitely move this to the voting meeting on the 25th. But as Andy talked about, this grant opportunity opens up the beginning of November. So we wanted to go ahead and start gathering information so we could be the first one in, to have our application in, because it's going to be highly competitive and it will be first come, first funded. So as you can see, we have talked with the county and with KCDC and with tourism. With this ED money for tourism, what we had discussed was kind of pulling from the Parks Master Plan, the opportunity to improve a couple of our parks, one with the city and one with the county, that will be Capitol View and Lakeview, to improve our ball fields so we can pull in some sports tournaments. So that's what the grant is about, to kind of do some lighting, bathrooms, do some improvements so we can pull in several different teams for regional tournaments to stay here, spend their money here, eat at our restaurants, go to our visitor sites, that sort of thing. So again, I can answer questions. If you all want to think about it and move it to next Monday, that's fine too. However you all want to proceed.
Can I ask a question, Rebecca?
Sure.
Hey, so obviously, I think this is a great plan. I love the idea of working with the the county on this issue. I do know that the county has a parks master plan. The city has a parks master plan. And because, like, for instance, we talk about Lakeview and Capitol View Park, even though it's a joint application, are we essentially submitting the application and whatever is received allocated for, say, the city will worry about, and whatever's allocated for the county will worry about, and neither the two shall meet? Or is there going to be a molding of those two plans to try to interact? And the reason I say that is because that, you know, if there's not I'm using words that are going to make it sound like they're other things, a comprehensive plan dealing with the parks and the sports tourism, then we're really doing a disservice to the community, because it's, once again, piecemeal. There needs to be one big idea here and plan that everything flows under. And I was wondering, I know those discussions have started, but I'm wondering to what level are we at with that, and how are you and the county fiscal court thinking that will proceed?
Right. So yes, the answer is yes. We will be working with them hand in glove, using. I believe that their master plan has not been completely adopted yet. So because ours had been, we will probably be the lead agency and they will be supporting us. But yes, we plan to work with them, and so both sets of fields are equally improved. Did I answer your question?
It did. I'm just wondering if now, and I know as soon as I ask this, I'm going to get 5 text messages from people. Are they going to then, are they going to kind of alter their plans based upon what we will apply for, or are they going to go for their plan and then we'll just kind of see where we go after the application goes in? Because like you said, the quicker we get it in, the quicker we get in line in the queue to consider these economic impacts.
Right. I believe, I don't want to speak for the county, but I believe that they will go forward with their plan, and we'll just see how that works in, because it will be park improvements. So, and I don't know exactly how all the fields are at both parks, but like say if one needs lighting and one needs turf improvements and one needs restrooms, it will encompass all of that. So whatever their plan says for Lakeview Park, I guess we'll look at that, and then we'll look at our improvements for Capitol View, and then kind of mold that together.
Is there a I know that the city has a parks master plan that we have adopted, but with regard to that, have we determined, now that we are considering a project value of $3 million for 2 locations? I understand that this is divided by that, but do we have a priority list of those things yet, or are we waiting for the Parks Committee to meet later this week to kind of hammer those down? Or because I think that's the next question that we're going to get on the streets when we're asked of what's this money going to be spent on if we do get it. Right.
So I know that right now we are gathering information from both park systems, from the county and the city, to see in general, you know, what kind of tournaments we've had in the past and what kind of tournaments we've had to turn down because we didn't have these amenities. So I believe that's what they're gathering right now, to see what we're lacking and what we need to go forward with and try to gather funds for.
And also, Commissioner Thompson, there's been a lot of discussions with tourism with Robin Antonucci. She collected a lot of data. So, you know, we just hosted the All-A boys soccer tournament, and I know they're very interested in being able to hold that again in Frankfort. And so I think through other discussions, whether also concession stands and toilets, that we know there's probably a number of things if we want to continually hold those type of events that draw in, I think she estimated between 1,800 and 2,000 people. There are some known improvements that we need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'd be fantastic if we weren't just leasing that property, if we're gonna throw a bunch of money at it. Just my 2
We'll save that
cents.
conversation for later.
Yes, ma'am.
And how is the 3 million determined? Was that the max that we can get, or?
We talked to the state economic development representative, and that was the number that we were given based on the needs that we had and how much money we thought would be available.
Rebecca, that might be an important point to make about the discussions we have on the state level and how they help us in determining projects, the viability of projects, what the likelihood of things being approved. Can you speak on that just a little bit?
Right. So Bertha Parton is the Kentucky's representative for economic development, and we typically go to her when we have a project and kind of lay out what we'd like to do and how that fits in with what they would like to fund. And she was pretty clear this time on that this kind of project would be great as long as we were thinking regionally or nationally, not just small tournaments. So that's why both parks would be needed to pull in that size of tournaments that would be considered regional or national. But she felt like it was a very competitive application, and she encouraged us to apply.
Oh, so we need to put this, well, if we have a couple of weeks here, it'd be better for you if we voted on this tonight and give you a couple of weeks rather than wait till next Monday.
Well, as long as I guess I want direction that yes, most of you are in favor of this, because right now we are gathering information. Robin's giving information. We've got Andy working on this. So if you don't want us to move forward, I would like to know. If everybody's okay with it, Monday's fine.
Yes, and that's important. And if you don't, that's fine. We can have individual discussions tomorrow and find another alternative application or use or project. But again, yes, and then otherwise we can certainly wait until our regular commission meeting.
My only question is, I don't know what project we would be setting aside for this. You know, is there another option that an opportunity cost here? We apply for this. What project are we displacing or moving aside? If we don't have anything else, then of course this is a no-brainer. We put up 20%.
We didn't identify any that were in this price range that would be applicable for this particular grant, but I'm willing to talk alternatives if people have them.
But if we did, we don't have that much time to get the application. Right. This is what we have in front. Well, how does the rest of the commission feel? Shall we, are you willing to vote on this tonight, or shall we table this? I'll entertain a motion either way.
I would move to table this at this time, Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion to table this until the Monday night voting session.
Yes, please.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. And any discussion on the tabling of the motion? I mean, of the action item. Yes.
I would like to say I am supportive of the idea, as long as there's, really nothing else that we're able to get together in this amount of time. So
I would.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Thompson.
I would also say that I'm very much in favor of this. I think we are being. I think I want to have discussions with Rebecca and City Manager Haig and the mayor and well, I just want to talk to everybody. And my concern is that there's a little short-sightedness, not in a bad way, but we're trying to figure out a way to spotlight, highlight, and spend. And I think there are bigger issues that have to be addressed, and perhaps that will require some public agreements, some private public agreements that because fields aren't the only issue that we have. You know, if we want to capture this money, you know, we have to have hotels, better accommodations. We have to have restaurants. We have to have some things that are all affected by these things. And it can't be just, we want to turf, you know, Capitol View Park. It has to be and I said this term earlier, and I hope I'm not confusing people. It has to be a comprehensive plan with this, that it deals with all of the issues. So if you're playing a citywide tournament and some of the games are in Lakeview and some of the games are at Capitol View, that we need to make sure that that it flows, that there's an even flow through the city. And so that's the only reason that I want to table it, just so I can talk to everybody and kind of see if there is a plan like that. I'll be honest, I thought it was quite entertaining to hear County Attorney Sparks and others laugh about the fact that we will not say the word merger because it's like the he who shall not be named kind of thing. And I mean, we are essentially proposing a resolution to spend a bunch of money on two parks from two different governmental entities to provide a comprehensive plan that they all work together. And that sounds a whole lot like merging at least those departments. I don't know what the will of everyone is, but that's something I want to take a pulse of as well. But I love the idea. I'm super excited about it because I think we kicked this can way down the road 8-9 years ago when we let Swim Play Frankfort walk out of the room, and now we are trying to catch up with everyone else who around us who is able to say that they have these amenities for their community. So I am very much down with doing this. I just want to make sure that we have a big 3,000 foot view of what's going on.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And Commissioner Thompson, one thing I would add is this, that yes, there needs to be a bigger picture view of this. And I also look at it as focus on what we can do now. And if there's an opportunity to make improvements that we know that need to happen, that also help us implement our Parks Master Plan, but also get at that sports tourism, which we've talked about. A lot of people have a priority. But yes, certainly recognize that there's other improvements that need to happen. And I think keeping that in mind when there's other grant opportunities, or as you all are doing the strategic plan and next year's budget, there might be other things that we can do, knowing we have this investment, that we can make other investments or connections or attracting investors to make others, knowing that we're going to have this investment, and that can help start, complete the picture.
Agree 100%. I just don't want the visual that we're piecemealing things, as Frankfort has tended to do over the years, and then we get one part of the project done and we're like, we really love this part of the project, and that's all that ever gets done. So, and I think Mayor Pro Tem Waldridge has seen that over the last 3 or 4 years, and she knows we start projects and we don't follow through on what the bigger vision is, and I want to make sure that happens too. So that's just me being contrary, I think.
Any other discussion? And I'll ask one. So Rebecca, if we table this to next Monday, we're okay on the timeline still, right?
Yep, we'll be fine.
Okay, we'll be fine. Okay, because I support it too, but if we need a couple of days to talk about it further and make sure that this is the direction. On the surface, it seems like a pretty good deal. Okay, well, without any discussion, I'll ask clerk to please call for a vote. To
Commissioner
table,
Waldron? Oh,
table,
to table,
to table the
yes.
action
Till Monday, correct?
for Monday.
Till Monday. Okay. Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Unger,
Yes.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Yes. So that motion carries. We'll talk about it Monday. Thank you, Rebecca.
Mhm.
And that was the last.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion. And second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 See you Monday. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.